So this just shows me, this is further proof to me that this story was not in service of blackness and black pride and all of that, but it was in service of white supremacy for all the reasons for all the aforementioned reasons that I gave. Because in the first Black Panther, they were going to make money from it. It was an opportunity to make money. And now they're like, whoa, let's not give them too much empowerment. Ultimately, and rightfully so, if black people want to tell our stories, we have to do it ourselves. We can't expect other people to do it for us, right? We can't expect other people to give us handouts, right? So ultimately, my point is this, I'm not here complaining and saying, oh no, Marvel didn't serve us justice. They didn't do it right for us. I'm saying that this should inspire more black people, more Africans to tell black and African stories, to empower black and Africanness. This should be, because if we put it in the hands of another culture, they're never going to do us justice, because first of all, it's not their job to do us justice. It's not their job to do us justice. And it doesn't help them if they do us justice. Only we can do us justice. Only we can celebrate ourselves the way that they celebrate themselves, or how we believe we deserve to be celebrated, instead of comparing ourselves to them. So, moreover, in an attempt for Black Americans to build a strong cultural identity based on their roots, white supremacy by design continues to dilute and monitor it. So this movie, the first Black Panther, acted as a guise of, oh, let's empower black people. But really and truly, when it comes down to it, the people that suffer most from this are ADOS, African descendants of American descendants of slaves. These are people that suffer most from it. Yes. Ooh, what happened there? These are people that suffer most from this. Yes, Africans suffer most for a lot from it, but we're not deprived of our culture and our heritage. You know, we're not deprived of that. You walk around, if you go to Africa, if you go to Nigeria, Western Africa, if you go around the continent, you're going to see true African pride, true heritage, and it's embedded in our DNA. It's embedded in the foods that we eat. It's embedded in our lifestyles, the way we speak, our language, everything that we do. But when it comes to America, obviously, when you look at the history of slavery and all your culture, all your Africanness was stripped away from you in America, stripped and stolen away from you. In fact, I made a documentary about this. I talk about this documentary often, The Great Divide. Go watch it, link down below. But when they put black people, my brothers and sisters, when they put them on the slave ship, just before they got on the slave ship, they made them drink this potion. It's a potion from a well. This is in Badagry slave port in Nigeria. And this potion had voodoo in it. It had, I'm sure, God knows what it was. But it made the slaves forget everything. All of their history, where they're from, made them forget everything for months. And so they would get on this ship. Well, this is the mythology that we hear, or this is what they tell us when we go there, right? They get on the ship and they forget who they are, where they're from. They forget everything. They go to the new world and they're told who they are. They're told that your last name is now Smith. Your last name is now De Silva. Your last name is now whatever. Your whole identity, your mother, your father, whoever you were, it doesn't exist anymore. So in a way, they give them this pseudo reality whereby we're stripping you of your heritage. We're pushing you into a new identity of whiteness and white society. But within that whiteness and white society, we're going to deny you. We're going to deny you pride. We're going to deny you everything, because within this context, within this white supremacy landscape, you're inferior. So you do not deserve American pride. You do not benefit from your Americanness the way that other white Americans do. you do not benefit. You are not culturally the same as us. And so let me break this down now. In an attempt for Black Americans to build a strong cultural identity based on their roots, the system designed by white supremacy ensures that it dilutes and monitors that your attempt. And this is exactly what this movie is doing. This movie is diluting your attempt to create your heritage, because they're giving you this false sense of Black pride. We will show you Africa. We will show you the superficialities of what Africa is without truly focusing on what really matters, which is uniting you with your history and your culture and letting you dive into that. Notice that in the story, they went into the history of the Mayan Empire. Well, not fully, but they tapped into a little bit of those histories. What about the African histories? They didn't tell us anything. Imagine a story about Africa in Africa. And they don't tell you African history. Instead, they tell you about Mayan history. And you don't understand that you're being ripped and denied of your culture and your heritage. The reason why white supremacy exists and survives is because of erasure, because they erase your history and your heritage. So let me continue. This film represents how Black Americans are encouraged to experience sanitized versions of Africa and their roots, a version crafted through a white supremacist lens, which was originally designed to divide them from their roots, and so therefore will never work to unify them with their roots. As long as Black foundational Americans continue to operate in this space, they will never truly connect with their heritage and find the grounding they so rightfully deserve. You have to know your history, and your history does not begin with slavery. Your history begins in Africa. And this identity that you're searching for will only be achieved fully. The richness of it, the fullness of it can only be achieved through learning your history, reading books, visiting Africa, diving deep, and encouraging more African authentic stories, because we all benefit from African stories. We all benefit from it. So why is that? Again, let's remember, Marvel is a white movie. Sorry, Marvel, Disney, these are white-run businesses, and their agenda is to serve, it's not to serve Black people, it's to serve white people. So when it comes down to it, America is a melting pot of different cultures and focuses on erasure. So this is another important point to bring up, right? America focuses on erasure of traditional cultures to assimilate to Americanness. This was an important tactic for the unification of the country. Because at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, America is a melting pot of different countries. Indigenous Americans were, their country was taken over by foreigners. And now how do you create one culture, one land? Well, you have to everyone's coming from the UK, from Spain, from Italy, from Germany, from Ukraine, from all these random countries, from Africa, from all over the world. And you're going to get a melting pot of different cultures, different ideologies, different things. And they say, no. When you come here, remove your culture and your heritage and assimilate into Americanness so we can create oneness. And that was very important in creating the national pride that we see in America today. That's why Americans are so overt and so pronounced about celebrating their Americanness. That's why it was important, because this is a country that was designed by fabrication. It's not a historically, it's not a country that was built by indigenous people. What America is today was built by foreigners. It's, and people that came with one ideology, freeness, right? The land of the free. We want freeness, and we want to allow anybody in the world. And till this day, America imports the world's brightest minds. So here's the thing. This unification of America was important. So they had to strip everybody that comes to this country. You have to be stripped away from your identity, your previous identity, because when you come here to this new world, you're a new person and you have to assimilate. But here is the catch with that. It only benefits white people, because Americanness is only truly encouraged and celebrated in white people. And non-white people or non-white Americans who have been in this country before or even as long as white people are othered and made to feel exotic and foreign. If you're not a white American, despite you being an indigenous American and being here before the white man came here, despite you being a black man who built this country, they brought you along with the white people as they migrated here. You migrated. Some of you have been here longer than some of the white people. Historically, you were still made to feel exotic and othered and foreign. Until this day, when we look at how the media depicts black Americans, they look at black Americans like some exotic animal, some exotic creature. It's so ridiculous. Some exotic thing. The blacks. This is what the blacks do. This is what they do. And so who suffers from this? So while America focuses on erasure of non-American cultures to unify the nation, it has traditionally excluded non-white people from their Americanness at the same time. This has forced blacks, American descendants of slaves, especially to desperately search for grounding in their identity. So the problem and why black Americans suffer the most from this is because you are stripped away from your Africanness, you are told to forget it, and you come here and you try to connect with your Americanness, and they say you're not American. You're not American enough. You're black. You're othered. You're not. You're foreign. You're exotic. But you've been here longer than them. You've been here longer than them. Some of them. You've been here as long or even longer than them. And some of you are even mixed with indigenous Americans. And this is your land. But no, they'd still deny you your rights. So they too historically stripped from their African culture, yes, and forced, okay. And so you're never validated in this system. The title white American, and this is how you see it even, for example, in the title of, you say an American, that's typically just a white person or white American. But with a black American, they don't say black Americans, they say African American. You're from Africa. Go back to Africa. I'm African American. I'm literally African, Nigerian American, and I'm American, right? I'm not foundational American. I'm African American. And so black American, that's why black people in America, descendants of slaves, have fought to say, no, we're not African American. We're black American. Well, the catch is I'm also black American. I'm black American. I'm African American. Whatever. I'm a different type. I'm not foundational American. That's why people are being more specific. American descendants of slaves. Foundational American. And I don't even like the term American descendants of slaves because it's like attaching your identity to slavery, and that's not right. So I like the term foundational American or foundational black American. That to me is a better term to describe it. Because you guys laid the foundation literally of this country and built it to what it was today, because America would not be successful without the free labor from blacks. It would not be. Free labor from black people. And so my point is, this has resulted in the diluting of African Americans, black Americans, foundational black Americans, cultural pride and therefore sense of self-worth. Because though this country may have been built by them, but it wasn't built for them. And as a result, marginalized groups are searching desperately for their cultural identity. Because what happens when you're stripped of your history as an African, when you came on the slave ship, stripped of your history, you came here, they gave you forced you to assimilate to their system and their culture, but still denied you of your Americanness, then you're now searching for that cultural grounding, that cultural heritage. You are searching for it because you're denied it on a consistent daily basis here in America. And so the problem now is the only way you can truly find that is by connecting deeply to your roots, your African roots. But there's this erasure of African stories. And so why the movie like Wakanda Forever is problematic is because you have the opportunity to go deep, delve deeper into a new African story, a new African culture, expose us to more richness of Africa, but instead you dilute it and you focus on another marginalized American group, not even giving that the justice that it deserves, skimming through it and lumping everything together. And that's the problem with the things being approved through the white lens. They will summarize Africa as one. They will summarize Africa as one place, just one. But how do you summarize 1 billion people? How do you summarize, when you think about Nigeria, over 250 different languages in one country, 2,500 dialects. How do you summarize that? Even within Nigeria, we're not unified culturally. Our cultures are so distinct. That's just one country, the most populous country in Africa, but just one country. Think about all the other diversities within African countries and how we're not unified. But this story focuses on lumping everything together. Look, there are pros and cons to unification, but one of the cons is the loss of cultural identity. And that is a massive con, because what that gives you is a sense of self-worth that is unmatched, that's impenetrable. When I look at my ancestors from the Benin Empire, right? Kings, that is embedded in my DNA. That's embedded in the stories. That's embedded in the culture in my household. How they instill self-worth in me. It's embedded in me. And people that are made to lack and lose their history and culture do not have that sense of self-worth, that grounding that is rooted deep in them and in their ancestry for thousands of years. And so what I'm saying is, for American descendants of slaves, okay, I hate that term, foundational Black Americans, to truly connect with that, they need to make the effort to explore Africa and to learn African stories and to read African history. And why Wakanda Forever failed at that is because though the movie, the original one, serviced that need, acted as though it was going to do that, acted as though that was the agenda to push African pride and African stories, African whole culture and histories, this new one kind of dropped the ball there. So, when it comes to it, in reality, these two very distinct cultures, African, West Africans, and, indigenous Americans, people from the Mayan Empire, so modern day Mexico and surrounding countries, in reality, these cultures are so distinct, they would never even interact with each other. But in this movie, because this movie is designed through the lens of whiteness and white supremacy, this is where we're seeing them interact with each other. In reality, these two very distinct cultures only ever interacted when they were both in America. So since Wakanda is in Africa, there is no reason for them to be interacting. But in this story, they're still interacting as pseudo-allies against whites in America. This mirroring from the realities of slavery and how these two groups historically interacted with white Americans. This is mirroring. This really isn't a story about Africans, but a revenge movie seeking reparations from slavery and the empowerment in the identities of Blacks and Native Americans. Let me read that again. This movie really isn't a story about Africans, which is what they market it as, but a revenge movie seeking reparations from slavery and empowerment in the identities of Blacks and Native Americans. So you're seeking reparations from slavery by showing Black pride and we don't need white man and all that stuff. That's what the narrative was. And you're seeking empowerment in your identities for Blacks and Native Americans, but you fail to do so because you don't do what it takes to actually get there, to actually do the work that will actually ensure that you empower your identity, which is what I broke down earlier.